How many games will the Seattle Seahawks win in 2024? What's going on, Seahawks fans? 12s out there. It's Mitch here, back with another NFL record prediction video. In this video, my record for the Seahawks in 2024, diving deep into their schedule, the easiest matchups, the toughest matchups, everything in between. This year, will Seattle finally break over the hump of 9-8, which they've been sitting at the last 2 years? 2 years ago, they made the playoffs as a wild card team. Last year, they just missed the playoffs as a wild card team. They were the third best team in their division last year, and I think many people from the outside looking in expect them to be the third best team in this division once again. Can they catapult the Rams right over the Rams? Can they beat out the Niners in the NFC West? Will they actually compete for this division? All that and more in this video. Seattle is a really interesting team because for the first time in a while, they're going through a change at the head coach position. Mike Macdonald is going to bring a fresh approach to the culture and the defense, most especially for the Seahawks. So let's break down how he may improve Seattle and why I'm high on the Seahawks potentially getting back to the playoffs in 2024. Gronk, spike the like button. Don't forget to comment your opinion. Seahawks fans, 12s, let me know. Do you think Seattle will make the playoffs this year? Do you think they'll miss the playoffs? Do you think they'll be very close on the fringe? Do you think they'll fall apart this season and they're actually rebuilding? Let me know in the comment section below. And don't forget to subscribe for all 32 record predictions just like this. Let's take a look at Seattle's 2024 schedule. So Seattle starts at home against the Denver Broncos. And honestly, the first 2 weeks of the season, when you're talking about playing a home game and away game, it doesn't get much better than playing the Broncos and the Patriots. I think two teams that their win totals are below like 5 this year or 5.5. Both teams are not looked at as playoff teams, not even below the bottom team in their division. Like both are projected to be the worst team in the AFC East and the AFC West. So it's a nice little start for Seattle. But that being said, typically teams don't start 2-0, even with this type of a schedule. So let's break it down first. I think the game at home is much easier than the game on the road. Seattle is always much better at home. And I think the home field advantage will definitely take it up a notch this year in terms of the defense. Like, I think what's been missing for Seattle has been that dominant defense and the defensive scheme providing them an edge. So when you have a guy like Mike Macdonald and you have a defensive scheme that he runs that for an offense is very confusing, very communication oriented, and there's a lot of moving pieces. There's safeties rotating all over the place, guys coming in the box, guys popping out to the secondary, different guys lining up at different gaps in terms of blitzing angles and things of that nature. That defensive scheme, when you combine that with a very loud, hostile Seattle stadium, it's a great mix to possibly elevate Seattle in terms of their ability to win some close games and their defense to be actually able to win them some games, especially at home. And I think that's going to be an instance in week 1 where, don't get me wrong, Seattle on offense should be able to move the ball against Denver. I don't really see Denver's defense as anything potent or special. Their pass rush is fine. They don't have great edge rushers, so I'm not really worried about the Seahawks maybe underwhelming offensive line in this game. And they only really have one really good corner, which is Pat Surtain, and he should be able to lock up DK Metcalf, but you still got Jackson Smith and Jigba in the slot, Tyler Lockett on the other side, Kenneth Walker running the ball. I think Geno Smith, you guys let me know where you stand on Geno Smith. I personally think he's a little bit underrated right now going into 2024. I thought he was excellent in 2022. He was just okay in 2023. I didn't think he was the reason they didn't make the playoffs, though. I think he's somebody that does need to be elevated by pieces around him, but he definitely can get the job done. I think he's probably an average starting quarterback. So I think he's much better than Bo Nix, Zach Wilson, or Jarrett Stidham. There's no question about that. Plus, you get the home field. Plus, you got the new offensive scheme, new defensive scheme. Definitely some question marks there facing a Sean Payton team, but I feel like there could also be a surprise factor within that. So I think Seattle gets that win over Denver pretty decisively. They also beat the Broncos 2 years ago, right? So it's 2 week 1 games in 2 out of the last 3 years, which is a little weird. But anyways, Seattle will win. In week 2, they play my New England Patriots, which I think is a potential slip-up game for Seattle. After a high-flying, awesome victory, decisive win over Denver, they actually have to go to the East Coast to play New England, which on the surface is not a great team. But the Patriots do have a very good defense, and they do have a very good pass rush. And they have one of the few secondaries that can actually cover the Seahawks receivers. So I feel like Geno Smith and the Seahawks offense is going to struggle to move the ball in this game, especially considering the Patriots can get to Geno Smith, cause some issues for him. This could be a game where if they turn it over a couple times, the Patriots could certainly win the game. On the other side, New England does, I think they're going through an offensive identity shift. Jacoby Brissett should be starting early in the year, which at least gives them a veteran presence under center. He's not great or anything, but he's not terrible by any means. And they do have a strong rushing attack. They're going to be looking like the Cleveland offense a little bit with run game, play action, throwing the ball down the field. And once Drake May gets in there, I really feel like it might take off. But the Patriots don't have a lot of great weapons, but they do have, I feel like, a run game, a scheme, the overall, their offensive line is not bad. They're at home. So this is a game where I could see New England actually pulling off a subtle upset. Seattle should be favored by like 3.5, 4 points, something like that. But I could see New England with their defense being able to keep this game very feisty and kind of defensive and then pulling it out at home. So I kind of see a little bit of a 1-1 start for Seattle, but don't get me wrong, I would not be shocked if they beat my Patriots. I only have New England with like 5 or 6 wins this year. I just think that first home opener is a tough game to go into someone's building and win. So I'm going to give the Patriots the win there, especially considering the travel for Seattle. Then in week 3, Miami plays in Seattle. Now, this is inverse to what I talked about with the Patriots. So I think that New England will give Seattle issues in terms of their pass rush when Seattle's on the road and their offensive line and all the new pieces that they have. Now, I feel like Seattle will give Miami some problems because it's similar to the Patriots game, right? Like Seattle is going to be at home, West Coast, Pacific Northwest. Miami is traveling literally like the furthest distance you can possibly travel to play an NFL game. They have a weak offensive line. They do have a great amount of speed in Miami, but Mike McDonald proved last year in Baltimore that even despite the difference in speed for Miami versus the Baltimore secondary, they were able to slow them down. I like Seattle's interior defensive line to penetrate and get after Tua and make life difficult on him. And I also feel like Miami is going to have some injuries on defense early in the year where their pass rush won't be as strong. So I really like Seattle to pull off a subtle upset of their own at home against the Dolphins here. Then in week 4, they play a really tough game in Detroit. It's on Monday Night Football. This game should be very exciting, though, and I'm looking forward to Mike McDonald versus Ben Johnson. That will be a great matchup for sure. Now, many Lions fans even have said to me, like, Seattle just finds a way to beat the Lions. You don't really know why, but it is just the case. But I do think this year the Lions are the superior team. They are at home. It is a primetime game at home. That's a very tough game for Seattle to walk into an elite team's building, one of the best teams in the NFC, and beat them. So I like Detroit because they've got strong line of scrimmage play. They can stop the run. They can get after the quarterback, and they're very good at the line of scrimmage on offense. They can run the football. They can keep Seattle, guessing in terms of their balance, which won't allow Mike McDonald to hone in on a certain script of defense. They're going to have to defend the run. They're going to have to defend the pass, play action, everything. So that's difficult to call a defense that way. And then offensively, I just think Detroit's one of the, offensively for Seattle, I think Detroit, their pass rush is going to be tricky in that primetime environment, and they've improved their secondary. A guy like Carlton Davis, they didn't have last year to kind of slow down DK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett. So I think the Lions win that game at home. Week 5, the Giants in Seattle. This is another East Coast team traveling to the West difficult for the Giants to win. The Seahawks have dominated the Giants in the last couple of seasons with Brian Daboll and Daniel Jones. I think the Seahawks once again take care of business against the Giants. They start 3-2. Week 6, they play the San Francisco 49ers. They have not beat San Francisco in a number of seasons, it feels like. I feel like it's been 5 or 6 straight since San Fran lost to Seattle, but I think this is the game that they finally lose. Thursday night, this for me, I'm considering possibly going to this game. I'm from Vancouver, if you guys don't know, so Seattle's very close. This is also like the week of Canadian Thanksgiving, so I'm going to have time on my hands to go to this game. I'm also a huge San Francisco fan, so if I were going to this game, I'd probably be cheering for the Niners. Not that I dislike the Seahawks. I like the Seahawks quite a bit, but with San Francisco, I'm just a big fan of them, so I feel like I'd probably be cheering for the 49ers, and I probably would want them to win, but for some reason, I do feel like Seattle will win. I think Mike Macdonald was hired to become the Seahawks coach because he knows how to handle these Shanahan attacks, and I do think they've done a job to improve their defensive line. I do think they've got a number of pieces in the secondary to be able to potentially, slow down San Francisco in the middle of the field, which is most crucial against San Francisco, right? It's not really the perimeter, it's the middle of the field. You have to stop the run as well. Big deals, right? Byron Murphy was brought in for a reason. They've got guys like Witherspoon, guys like Love at safety. They revamped their linebacker position to be better in coverage. So there's a number of reasons. Seattle should be able to better defend San Francisco, but it also comes down to, can San Francisco penetrate Geno Smith, get to him, sack him, pressure him? And that is probably the biggest question mark I have going into these San Francisco matchups is, can Seattle block the 49ers? That's going to be a problem. But I do think that Seattle at home in a primetime setting, their crowd can get them in it, and they can potentially win a close game. So for the first time in years, I have Seattle beating the Niners. Then in week 7, I've got Seattle continuing a winning streak here and beating Atlanta in Atlanta. This is a game that I said on my Atlanta record prediction that it could go either way. So I kind of have this as a swing game for both teams. So for Atlanta, I have them at 8-9, 9-8, and we'll see what I have Seattle at. But ultimately, I see Seattle as the better team, but I think Seattle's got the better defense. That's what I'd say. Atlanta, I feel like, probably got the better quarterback as long as Kirk Cousins looks like last year. They do have the better offensive line. They do have the better run game. They do have, a pretty good coaching staff. I like their new coaching staff, but I think Seattle's defense is much better, and I think that allows them more stability, and I think Seattle in that dome against a weaker pass rush in Atlanta, they can air the ball out. So I really feel like Geno could have a huge game in Atlanta. So I'm going to go with Seattle. I like the matchup for them. I just feel like it could be an either way type of game because it is on the road against a pretty good team in Atlanta this year, and yeah, it's tricky. So that's an either way one, but I'm leaning Seattle. Week 8, the Buffalo Bills in Seattle. I think the Bills knock off Seattle. I think Josh Allen will simply be too much. As good as I think Seattle's defense could be this year in terms of improvement, not saying it's going to be elite, but I do think it will be better. I simply feel like the Bills, Josh Allen, his legs, he makes plays that you can't scheme for. He extends plays. He's got a phenomenal arm. He can run. I think their running game is going to be pretty good in Buffalo. They've got tight ends to attack you with, receivers. And then defensively, McDermott is a very smart coach. And they always have solid front sevens. So I feel like Buffalo, although the travel is significant, I feel like they could go to Seattle and win that game. Then you've got Los Angeles at the Seahawks. I think that Seattle will probably split with the Rams. The Rams have kind of owned the Seahawks as well. But again, those were Pete Carroll Seahawks teams. Those were not Mike Macdonald Seahawks teams. With the new coaching, I think it's going to give a new look to all of these NFC West rivalries. So I think they'll beat them at home, and let's say they lose to them on the road. I think both teams will be in the race for the wild card in the NFC. I think San Francisco is definitively the best team in the division, and we'll continue to talk about that. But I feel like Seattle and the Rams, I could see that flipping either way for second or third in this division. I think both teams are competent enough to make the playoffs. I would say that the Rams have the more proven coach and the better coach, and he's a brilliant offensive mind in Sean McVay. I also feel like Matthew Stafford is the better quarterback. I do like the Rams' offensive line and their overall offense more, but I do like Seattle's defense. I do feel like Seattle, though, they're kind of a weird mix because I really like their scheme on defense, some of their defensive playmakers. I think they're going to be sort of an explosive team on both sides of the ball. I could see them being a little bit more inconsistent than the Rams, where I feel like the Rams, they're kind of a bend but don't break defense, especially post Aaron Donald, and they're a very ball control, well-run offense. While the Seahawks are more of like a 4-play drive type offense. Right, that's kind of how I feel about them. And then defensively, they're like sack here, pressure, cause a tip pass, interception. Like, they're more of an explosive, fun team. I think the 49ers will get their comeuppance even post-bye at home in San Francisco over the Seattle Seahawks. I think the Seahawks will split with the Cardinals. The Cardinals typically get one on Seattle every year, so I'm just going to lean into that. Kyler Murray, he's just one of those quarterbacks. They do have a good offense. I like their offensive line, Marvin Harrison, Trey McBride, James Conner. I like their offensive build quite a bit, but their defense is shaky. So I think their offense will win them a game and their defense will lose them a game in Arizona. Then I think the Jets will beat the Seahawks. Seahawks having to travel all the way to New York. The Jets have a phenomenal defense, very talented. Aaron Rodgers is a very smart quarterback. I feel like he'll run a simple offense, but it will be highly effective with Garrett Wilson, Mike Williams, Breece Hall. And as long as the Jets are healthy at the offensive line, they should be able to not turn the ball over and win with defense against Seattle at home. That could also be a weather game. Week 15, they play the Packers at home, which I'm high on the Packers this year, but I like Seattle in their building to take care of business. I think, again, this is a Mike McDonald defense against a Shanahan style of attack on offense. Now, what I'm worried about with the Packers is they can run the ball, and they're really balanced. But I do feel like Seattle's offense could win them this game. I think the Packers' defense will be a bit up and down. They're not going to be as steady or as talented as the Niners, but I do feel like they've got some really talented pass rushers, a couple of guys in the secondary like McKinney and Alexander that can give you issues, but they also have holes. So I feel like Seattle can potentially win even a shootout in this game if that comes to be. So, and then again, Seattle home field is a big factor. Week 16, I think they'll probably beat the Vikings at home, especially if it's J.J. McCarthy. I have a lot of respect for Kevin O'Connell, that offense. Justin Jefferson, I think they've got a ton of talent. I just feel like if it's Sam Darnold or J.J. McCarthy, I just don't think they have enough at quarterback to beat the Seahawks, personally. And then in week 17, I've got the Bears winning on the short week at home in Chicago. Bears are very talented. Now, could Seattle win this game? Yes. But Chicago, short week. Caleb is very talented. He'll have plenty of weeks to be experienced at the NFL level. They've got great receivers, a plethora of talent. I think their offensive line will be improved. Their run game is solid. And their defense is really solid as well. Well ran by Matt Eberflus. So I think Chicago will take that game. So ultimately, I have Seattle at 9-8 once again for the third year in a row, which is probably a good guess, seeing as how they've been 9-8 the last 2 years. I think the coaching will elevate their team, but I do have questions about the schedule is tougher than last year, in my opinion. The offensive line is highly questionable to me. The offensive scheme, I'm not sure what it's going to look like quite yet. Geno, a little bit of a question there. And then mostly like defensively, I wonder, okay, they've got the great scheme. I like a lot of their players, but I also feel like there's holes. Like edge rushers kind of average to me. Safety, they could use a piece or two more. Corner, they could use a piece or two more. I feel like they're a good team, but they're not a great team. I could see them certainly making the playoffs as the 7 or the 6 seed in the NFC. You guys let me know in the comment section below what you think. It's Mitch. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next record prediction video. Peace.